Kola didn't want a partner, he wanted an accessory. But when he dismissed the woman in traditional rapper and village accent, he forgot that true power doesn't announce itself, it waits to be discovered. The story opens with a brutal contrast, the sleek marble floors and designer lighting of Kola's penthouse versus Somi's unpolished authenticity. Kola winces as Somi greets his colleagues in Igbo instead of English, her wrapper tied traditionally while every other woman wears imported gowns. The atmosphere is suffocating, the sharp laughter of Kola's friends echoes through the room, punctuated by the soft clink of champagne glasses, highlighting Somi's exile in a world that mistakes packaging for worth. The marriage happened because Kola's mother insisted, and in their culture, a mother's wish was law. Somi stood at the altar in her grandmother's coral beads and white lace, her smile genuine, her hope fragile. Kola stood beside her in his imported Italian suit, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the crowd as if calculating how quickly he could escape. "She's a good woman," his mother had said when she'd presented Somi's family. "Humble. Respectful. She will build your home." What his mother didn't say, what Kola had anyway, was that Somi was everything he'd spent 10 years in America trying to forget. The village accent. The traditional values. The unpolished edges that reminded him of a past he'd rebranded himself to escape. That night, in their new Victoria Island apartment, Kola made his intentions clear. "We are going to work on you," he said, scrolling through his phone while Somi unpacked her small suitcase. "Your English needs improvement. Your wardrobe needs an upgrade. And please," he looked up, his expression almost pleading, "stop speaking Igbo in public. It's embarrassing." Somi's hand stilled on the wrapper she was folding. "Embarrassing to who?" "To both of us." He turned back to his screen. "You'll understand once you meet my circle. They're different. Sophisticated. You need to adapt." She didn't argue. She simply nodded, placed the wrapper in the drawer, and wondered quietly if the man she'd married had ever truly looked at her at all. By morning, Kola had already begun his project. He left a stack of fashion magazines on the dining table with a note, "Study this. We have a party next week." The party was everything Somi had feared and nothing she was prepared for. Kola's penthouse throbbed with ambient electronica and the low murmur of conversations in flawless English, peppered with French phrases and American slang. Women glided past in silk and sequins, their laughter bright and performative. Men in designer casual wear discussed crypto portfolios and European vacations. Somi wore the dress Kola had bought her, a tight black number that felt like a costume. Her natural hair was slicked back into a bun he'd insisted on. She stood near the balcony, holding a glass of champagne she didn't want, trying to look like she belonged. "So you're Kola's wife?" A woman named Tenny materialized beside her, her smile sharp as glass. "How exotic. Where did he find you?" "We met through family," Somi replied carefully. "Oh?" Tenny's eyebrows rose. "An arranged thing. How traditional." She said the word like it was a disease. Before Somi could respond, Kola appeared, his hand firm on her elbow. "Somi was just leaving to check on the kitchen," he said smoothly, steering her away. "In the kitchen?" he hissed under his breath. "What did I tell you about engaging with them? Just smile and nod. Don't talk so much." She asked me a question. "And you answered in that village accent." His frustration was barely concealed. "We'll work on it. But for tonight, maybe just stay in here." He left her standing among the catering staff, and through the doorway, Somi watched him rejoin the party, laughing easily, his arm draped around Tenny's shoulders. She didn't cry. She simply removed the uncomfortable heels, sat on a kitchen stool, and realized with cold clarity that her husband saw her as a problem to be managed, not a person to be loved. During the day, while Kola worked at his tech startup downtown, Somi had the apartment to herself. She discovered the building's private library on the third floor, a quiet sanctuary of leather chairs and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that the other residents never used. It became her refuge. This morning, she settled into her usual corner with a warm copy of The Economist and her laptop open to a development policy forum she'd been following since her Cambridge days. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she drafted a response to a debate on microfinance frameworks in sub-Saharan Africa, her analysis sharp and data-driven. The library door opened. Somi quickly minimized her screen and grabbed a nearby magazine, something glossy about skincare. An elderly man shuffled in, nodded politely, and disappeared into the stacks. When he was gone, Somi exhaled and returned to her work. Her phone buzzed. "Kola, what are you doing?" "Reading," she typed back. "Good. We have dinner with my investors tonight. Wear the blue dress. And please try to smile more. You always look so serious." She stared at the message, then at her laptop screen where her half-finished policy analysis waited. The contrast was dizzying. That evening, Kola came home to find her in the blue dress, her makeup perfect, her smile practiced. "Better," he said approvingly, not noticing the Cambridge certificate she'd just hidden back in her drawer, or the resignation settling behind her eyes. At dinner, while Kola's investors discussed their expansion into Asian markets, Somi remained silent, nodding politely, her mind elsewhere, calculating currency fluctuations and policy risks they were too arrogant to see coming. Nobody asked her opinion. Nobody imagined she had one. Kola's mother arrived unannounced on a Thursday afternoon, her wrapper bright against the apartment's minimalist decor. "Somi, my daughter." She embraced her warmly, then settled onto the leather sofa with the discomfort of someone unused to such furniture. "I came to see how you are managing." They shared chin-chin and zobo, falling into easy Igbo conversation. For the first time in weeks, Somi felt like herself. "He treats you well?" Mama asked, though her eyes suggested she already knew the answer. "He's adjusting to marriage. And you are adjusting to this." Mama gestured at the cold, expensive space around them. "But adjustment should not mean erasure, NNE. A man who is ashamed of where you come from will never honor where you're going." The words landed like stones in water, creating ripples Somi couldn't ignore. That evening, Kola's business partner Chidi visited for drinks. Somi served them, then moved to leave. "Wait," Chidi said, his tone friendly. "Somi, right? Kola mentioned you're from Enugu." "My mother's from there." "Do you know the Nwik family?" Before Somi could answer, Kola cut in. "Somi's actually from a smaller village. Very rural. She doesn't really know the main families." His smile was apologetic, as if explaining a child's limitations. Chidi's expression shifted, subtle but clear. Understanding. Pity. After he left, Somi confronted Kola. "Why did you lie?" "I didn't lie. I simplified. You made me sound. I made you sound exactly like what you are." His patience snapped. "Look, Somi, I'm trying to build something here. My reputation matters. And right now, having a wife who can't hold a conversation at a business dinner is a liability I can't afford." The word hung between them. Liability. Somi's mother's warning echoed in her head. But she said nothing, just retreated to the bedroom and pulled out her laptop, losing herself in the one place where her mind was still valued, the anonymous forums where her expertise spoke louder than her accent ever could. The invitation arrived in a thick cream envelope, Grand Investment Summit, Eco Hotel and Suites. Kola held it like a holy relic. "This is it," he breathed. "Mr. Chen is attending. If I can secure his backing, we're talking Series B funding. Millions." Somi looked up from her book. "That's wonderful. It's in 3 weeks. Black tie. Every major player in West African tech will be there." He was already mentally rehearsing his speech, pacing the living room. I need to be perfect. The presentation, the networking, everything. I find something appropriate to wear, Somi offered. Kola stopped pacing. Actually, I think it's better if you sit this one out. The room went quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. What? It's a high-stakes environment, Somi. Very formal. Very. He searched for the word, international. The last thing I need is any distractions. I'm your wife, not a distraction. You know what I mean. His tone turned pleading. Please don't make this difficult. This is the biggest night of my career. I need to focus, and I can't do that if I'm worried about, he stopped himself. About me embarrassing you. He didn't deny it. I'll make it up to you. After the deal closes, we'll take a trip. Anywhere you want. Somi set her book down carefully, her hand steady even as something inside her cracked. Kola, do you even know what I studied at university? He blinked, caught off guard. You went to university. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. That night, Somi didn't sleep. She sat in the dark, her laptop glowing, and made a phone call to an old professor at Cambridge. When she hung up, her jaw was set, her decision made. If Kola wanted perfection, she would give him exactly that. But on her terms. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people, if you've ever been underestimated because of where you're from or how you speak, you know this ache. Somi's about to do something that will change everything. Stay with us. The boutique was in Ikoyi, discreet and expensive, the kind of place that didn't advertise. Somi walked in wearing her usual wrapper and was immediately assessed by the attendant, a quick, dismissive glance that said you're in the wrong place. I need a gown for the investment summit, Somi said calmly. Something that makes a statement. The attendant's skepticism was palpable. Those pieces start at 500,000 naira. Somi pulled out a black card, her own, not Kola's. I'm aware. An hour later, she emerged with a garment bag and a small, satisfied smile. Her next stop was a private office in Victoria Island. The nameplate read, Dr. Amora Okonkwo, International Relations Consultant. Dr. Amora greeted her like the old friend she was. Somiari Lawson. Or should I say Mrs. Kola now? Her smile was knowing. I heard you'd gone underground. Not underground. Just observing. They spent 2 hours in that office, Somi reviewing documents, making calls, her rusty Mandarin sharpening with each conversation. Dr. Amora watched with quiet pride. Your husband has no idea who you are, does he? Somi's smile was sad. He's never asked. Will you tell him? Before the summit? No. Somi's voice was steady. If he can't see me, I'll make sure everyone else does. That evening, Kola came home to find Somi cooking traditional bitter leaf soup, the kind he'd asked her to stop making because it smelled too local. What's this? He asked, wrinkling his nose. Dinner. Somi, we talked about this. Can't you make something more modern? She ladled soup into a bowl and set it in front of him. Eat, Kola. You need your strength for the summit. He pushed it aside, ordered sushi instead, and spent the rest of the evening rehearsing his speech in the mirror, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening in the woman he'd married. The Grand Investment Summit was everything Kola had imagined, and more. Crystal chandeliers. Ice sculptures. A stage with LED screens displaying tech innovations from across the continent. Kola moved through the crowd in his custom tuxedo, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, his confidence electric. Mr. Chen arrived fashionably late, surrounded by assistants and translators. He was smaller than Kola expected, his expression unreadable, his handshake brief. Mr. Chen, such an honor. Kola's smile was wide. I've been looking forward to discussing how Next Tech Solutions can. Mr. Chen held up a hand, spoke rapidly in Mandarin to his translator, a nervous young woman who looked overwhelmed. The translator stumbled through the interpretation. Mr. Chen says he wants to hear about cultural integration. No, wait, cultural sensitivity in African markets. Kola blinked. Oh, yes. Absolutely. We are very culturally aware. Mr. Chen spoke again, his tone sharpening. The translator paled. He's asking about Confucian business principles. How they apply to. I'm sorry, I don't understand this terminology. The conversation derailed rapidly. Kola tried to steer toward his prepared pitch, but Mr. Chen kept asking questions the translator couldn't handle, complex inquiries about governance structures, regional partnership protocols, ethical frameworks that required cultural fluency Kola's team simply didn't have. 15 minutes in, Mr. Chen stood, his face impassive. He spoke one final sentence. The translator swallowed. Mr. Chen says, this is a waste of his time. He's leaving. Kola's word tilted. Wait. Please, if we could just. But Mr. Chen was already walking toward the exit, his entourage following, and Kola stood frozen in the center of the ballroom, watching his future dissolve, surrounded by witnesses to his spectacular failure. And then, through the crowd, he saw her. Somi entered the ballroom like she owned it. Gone was the uncertain village girl. In her place stood a woman in a midnight blue Osuok gown, hand-beaded with gold thread, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo, her bearing regal. She moved with quiet purpose, head turning in her wake. Kola's mouth fell open. Somi. What are you? She walked past him without a glance, her eyes locked on Mr. Chen's retreating figure. Chen Shenshen. Her voice rang out, clear and confident. Chin Denisha. Mr. Chen stopped. Turned. His eyes widened slightly. Somi bowed, a respectful Chinese greeting, and began speaking in flawless Mandarin, her tone warm but professional. The ballroom went silent. Even the ambient music seemed to fade. Mr. Chen responded, his expression transforming from irritation to interest. They conversed rapidly, Somi's hands moving expressively, her smile genuine. She referenced Confucian principles, quoted Sun Tzu, drew parallels between traditional African governance and Chinese business philosophy that made Mr. Chen nod appreciatively. Then she switched to English, her accent suddenly crisp and British. Mr. Chen has concerns about ethical sourcing and community impact. He's wondering if Nextech has considered partnership models that honor local stakeholders rather than extracting from them. She looked at Kola for the first time. Do you have an answer for him? Kola stammered something about sustainability. It sounded hollow even to his own ears. Somi turned back to Mr. Chen, spoke in Mandarin, then addressed the gathering crowd in English. Perhaps I can clarify Nextech's position. You see, I've been consulting on their community integration strategy, though my husband doesn't know it yet. She proceeded to outline a comprehensive framework, citing specific villages, economic models, cultural preservation initiatives. Her knowledge was encyclopedic. Her delivery, flawless. Mr. Chen listened, asked questions, received answers that satisfied him. By the end, he was smiling. Wadue Tihan Gonshin Tiu, he said, then through Somi's translation, I'm very interested. But only if Mrs. Kola leads the cultural integration team. The room erupted in murmurs. Tenny stood frozen, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. Chidi's jaw had literally dropped. And Kola just stared at his wife as if seeing her for the very first time. The private conference room felt smaller with Mr. Chen's entire team present. Kola sat at the end of the table, numb, as Somi orchestrated the meeting in 3 languages. Documents were produced, contracts she'd apparently been reviewing for weeks. Projections she'd modeled. Risk assessments written in her hand. When Mr. Chon finally excused himself to confer with his advisors, Chidi leaned across the table. Kola, what the hell is happening? Your wife is. I know, Kola whispered. Do you? Chidi's expression was incredulous. Because I just watched her negotiate a $12 million deal using advanced trade theory and cultural diplomacy. That's not something you learn from a village. Somi returned, her expression professional. Mr. Chen wants to see our community pilot project in Enugu next month. I told him I'd arrange it. Somi. Kola's voice cracked. Who are you? She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment he saw everything he'd been too blind to notice. The intelligence. The strength. The quiet dignity he'd mistaken for simplicity. I'm who I've always been, she said softly. You just never asked. Later, in the back of their car, Kola tried to process. Cambridge. You studied at Cambridge. MA in International Relations. M.Sc in Development Economics. The consultancy work. I've been running it remotely for 2 years. Anonymous. Clients don't need to see me to trust my analysis. Her smile was bitter. Unlike my husband. Somi, he reached for her hand. She pulled away. You called me a liability. You hid me from your friends. You were ashamed of the very things that made me qualified to save you tonight. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes glistened. I wore the wrappers and cooked the traditional meals and spoke Igbo because I'm proud of where I come from. Not because I couldn't be anything else. I didn't know. You didn't ask. The car pulled up to their building. Somi gathered her gown and stepped out, leaving Kola sitting in the dark, finally understanding what he'd almost destroyed. Some truths arrive gently. Others crash into us like thunder. If you've ever had to prove your worth to someone who should have seen it all along, share this story. Some recognitions come too late. Some arrive just in time. 3 weeks later, Somi stood in the doorway of their apartment, 2 suitcases at her feet. The deal with Mr. Chen had closed. Nextech's valuation had tripled. Kola's face was on the cover of business magazines, but every article mentioned the brilliant Mrs. Kola, who'd made it possible. You don't have to leave, Kola said quietly. He looked smaller somehow, humbled. We can start over. I'll do better. Will you? Somi's voice wasn't angry, just tired. Or will you love the version of me that the world finally sees, while still being ashamed of the woman who makes your dinner? I was wrong. About everything. Yes, you were. She picked up her bags. But this isn't about punishment, Kola. It's about dignity. I spent 6 months making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. That's not a marriage. That's a performance. Then let me audition again. His voice broke. Please. Somi paused, her hand on the door. I'm moving to the Enugu office to run the community project. Mr. Chen wants me to expand it across West Africa. It's the work I've always wanted to do. I'll wait. Kola's eyes were red. However long it takes. She looked at him, really looked, searching for the man she'd hoped to find on their wedding day. Maybe someday you'll love the village girl and the Cambridge graduate as the same person. When you do, you'll know where to find me. She walked out into the Lagos afternoon, her head high, her step certain. Behind her, Kola stood in the doorway of an apartment that suddenly felt cavernous and cold, finally understanding that the woman he'd dismissed as too local had always been too extraordinary for him to deserve. 6 months later, Somi's project was featured in international development journals. She wore her traditional wrappers to every conference, spoke Igbo in her TED Talk, and never once apologized for who she was. And in Lagos, Kola kept the bitter leaf soup recipe she'd left behind, learning slowly, painfully, that loving someone means celebrating everything they are, not just the parts that make you look good. Some women wait to be discovered. Others discover themselves and walk away from anyone too blind to see them. Somi chose the latter. And in doing so, she became the queen she'd always been. Crowns don't wait for permission. They are worn by those brave enough to claim them.